There is an old Vreth saying, older than their empire, older than their first warships, older even than the conquest doctrine that had made them masters of 31 worlds. That goes, know the shape of the thing you are hunting, and you will never be surprised. Commander Rethkas had lived by that saying for 240 years. He had hunted rebel Sorath on the ice shelf moons of Perduum. He had chased Kelvi insurgents through the fungal megaforests of the Outer Drift. He had pulled Marin separatists out of collapsed tunnel networks with the patience of a creature that knew it had already won before the chase began. He knew the shape of things. He did not know the shape of Sergeant Amara Diallo. Nobody did. That was the problem. She had been operating in the Kareth Highlands for 814 days by the time Rethkas was assigned to find her. In that time she had destroyed 6 Vreth communications relays, 2 fuel depots, 1 forward operating base, and a planetary garrison command post that had been considered impregnable by every military assessor who looked at it. 3 layers of kinetic shielding, 400 soldiers, overlapping sensor grids, and a perimeter that could detect a mouse at 400 meters. She had walked through it on a moonless night, killed the garrison commander in his own quarters, and was 11 kilometers away in the mountains before the body was found. The Vreth had sent 4 separate kill teams after her. None of them came back the way they went in. 2 came back considerably reduced. 1 came back and refused to discuss what had happened in the valley, even under direct neural interrogation, which the Vreth medical staff found more disturbing than the operational failure itself. The 4th team did not come back at all. Rethkas read every report. He watched every piece of recovered sensor footage. He studied the human the way he had studied every target in his long career, looking for the shape of her, looking for the place where the pattern broke and the weakness lived. What he found instead kept him awake in a way he had not been kept awake since he was a young soldier, who had not yet understood that the universe was largely indifferent to how ready you felt. Not according to any model, not according to any doctrine. She moved at night when the cold should have degraded her, because humans, warm-blooded, heat-radiating, biosignature-obvious humans, were supposed to be easier to track in the cold, their body heat blazing against the dark like a signal fire. Instead, she had somehow learned to mask it, packing herself in clay from the riverbeds, moving slowly, using the terrain the way a creature born to it moved, the way something that had evolved in these mountains for 10,000 generations would move. She was from a city called Lagos, on a continent called Africa, on a planet called Earth, and she had never been to Kareth 7 in her life before the occupation, and none of that seemed to matter to her at all. She adapted, faster than anything Rethkas had ever hunted, faster, he was privately beginning to suspect, than anything he was built to understand. He requested additional resources and was denied. He requested authorization to level the Highland Valley network, and was denied. Too much infrastructure, too much economic value. He was told to handle it with what he had. He took 12 soldiers, his best, veterans of 6 campaigns, fitted with the latest generation of combat exosuits, armor that could absorb a direct hit from a light artillery round, integrated weapon systems, sensors that could track a heartbeat through a stone wall. He took a dropship with full-spectrum scanning. He waited until his intelligence networks gave him a confirmed position fix. Then he went to the valley. Amara heard the ship before she saw it. She was crossing the dry riverbed at the valley floor, moving fast and low, the way Sergeant Major Ose had taught her back in Abuja, when she was 22 years old, and thought that military training was the hardest thing she would ever do. Ose had made them move for 72 hours without sleep through the Niger Delta in August. Full kit, no complaints permitted, and at the time, she had hated every minute of it. Now she thought about him almost every day, and felt something in her chest that was too complicated to have a clean name. She heard the engine signature, lower and more resonant than the standard Vreth patrol craft, which meant something heavier, which meant they had sensed something serious this time, and she did not stop moving. Stopping was how you died. Every lesson she had ever learned on this planet had compressed itself into that one principle. You did not stop. You did not stand and stare at the thing coming for you and let your nervous system do what nervous systems wanted to do when faced with something large and deadly dropping out of the sky. You moved, and you fought, and you used what you had. She had a rifle, 2 grenades, a combat knife, 40 meters of high-tension wire she had stripped from a relay station 4 weeks ago, and an almost supernatural knowledge of the valley floor that she had spent 800 days earning, one careful step at a time. She also had 3 years of rage sitting in her chest like a coal, and she had learned not to waste it on panic. The ship's searchlight swept the ridge above her, and she pressed herself into the shadow of a boulder, breathing slow and deliberate, the way her body had long ago learned to do under pressure, the kind of slow that looked like calm from the outside, and felt, from the inside, like holding a door shut against a storm. The light passed over her, moved on. They had a fix on her, not precise, not yet, or they would have opened fire from altitude rather than descending. They were coming down to confirm the position before they committed. That gave her time, but she had done more with less. She began to move toward the narrow defile at the valley's eastern end, the one she had scouted 6 months ago, and kept in her memory like a playing card held back from the table, waiting for the right moment to lay it down. The passage was barely 3 meters wide, and choked with debris from an old rockslide, the kind of terrain that the Vreth exosuits would have to slow down and pick through one at a time. The ship couldn't follow. Their sensors would be partially degraded by the iron content in the rock walls. Their numbers would mean nothing in a space that only permitted single file. She ran the wire as she moved, threading it low across the kill zones she had already chosen in her mind, anchoring the ends around outcroppings of rock with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this enough times that her hands knew the job without asking her brain for much input. The grenades she placed with more care. The slope above the second bend was just steep enough, the rocks just loose enough, and if she got the angle right on the throw, she would not need to be anywhere near the blast. Behind her, the dropship touched down in the riverbed. She heard the ramp deploy. She heard the sound of armored feet hitting the ground, heavy, deliberate, confident. 12 sets, maybe more. She counted them the way she had learned to count everything, automatically, without needing to think about it. Behind her, she was already at the defile entrance. She allowed herself one breath, one real one, deep and full, the kind that reached all the way down, and then she turned around and waited just long enough to be seen. The searchlight found her. She heard the change in their movement, the acceleration, the way 12 experienced soldiers shifted from a search pattern into a pursuit without needing to discuss it. They were good. She could tell, even from here, that they were very good. She went into the defile. Vreth saw her for exactly 1.4 seconds before she disappeared into the rock passage. And in that 1.4 seconds, he felt something he had not felt in 2 centuries of hunting. He felt the ground shift. Not literally. The riverbed was solid beneath his boots. But somewhere in the part of his mind that had kept him alive through 6 campaigns and 400 engagements, something old and experienced, and usually very quiet, said to him, "She chose to be seen." "Hold," he said. His second, Velthar, was already moving forward. "We have the position, sir. She's cornered in the passage." "She is not cornered," Vreth said, and the certainty of it was cold and absolute in his chest. "She went in there deliberately. She wants us to follow." Velthar paused. "It's one human, sir, on foot, with a rifle." "She destroyed an impregnable garrison with one human on foot." Vreth stared at the narrow entrance to the defile, at the darkness between the rocks, and felt the shape of the trap in it the way you felt a drop in temperature before a storm. "Get me the aerial drone. I want to see what's in that passage before anyone sets foot in it." It took 4 minutes to launch and position the drone. By the time the feed came through, Vreth had already identified the wire lines, the grenade placement, the carefully chosen angles, the second and third kill zones stacked behind the first, each one making the previous mistake necessary before the next one revealed itself. It was, in the dispassionate assessment of his professional mind, exquisite. "She did this in the time it took us to land and deploy," Velthar said quietly, looking at the same feed. "She probably did half of it before we arrived," Vreth said. "She knew we were coming. She was waiting for us." He studied the passage for a long moment. "Send the drones in first, all of them. Detonate the wire manually. Do not enter that passage until every trap in it has been cleared, and when you enter, you go one at a time, with full shields, forward. It would take time. It would burn resources, and the human would be long gone by the time they were through." Velthar understood this too. "She'll escape, sir." "She was always going to escape," Vreth said. He clicked his mandibles slowly. The old gesture, the one that meant acceptance of an uncomfortable truth. The purpose of tonight was never to capture her. Tonight was her message to us. What message? Vreth looked up at the dark mountain ridge, at the impossible terrain that one soft-bodied creature from a world he had barely glanced at in 3 years had somehow turned into her personal fortress. And he thought about the shape of things, and what it meant when the shape refused to hold still. "That she knows this valley better than we do," he said. "That she has prepared it. That every move we make in it, she has already thought through. That she is not hiding from us. She is operating, and we are in her territory." He was quiet for a moment. "She wants us afraid of the dark." Velthar looked at the ridge. "And are we?" Vreth not answer immediately, which was for a Vreth commander of his experience and reputation, answer enough. "Send the message to High Command," he said finally. "Request authorization for the bombardment option. I don't care about the infrastructure anymore. I care about this being over." He had expected that. He sat in the open dropship bay and watched the drones work their slow way through the passage. And he thought about what it meant that a single human being had, in 800 days, made an entire planetary garrison so nervous that they had sent him their best, and he was sitting in a dry riverbed at midnight asking for permission to burn a mountain range down. She had won something tonight that had nothing to do with the valley. He understood that now. Amara was 4 kilometers away and climbing when she heard the distant pop of the drones triggering her tripwires, and she smiled in the dark in a way that her face hadn't moved in longer than she could remember. Not because she was safe. She was never safe, hadn't been safe in 3 years, had quietly stopped expecting safety the way you stopped expecting certain weather after enough seasons proved it wasn't coming. Not because she had won exactly, though she had certainly not lost. She smiled because they were still following the script she had written for them. Because she had seen exactly this moment, these choices, this valley, this night, in her head weeks ago, and walked into it anyway, and it had gone the way she had believed it would go. There was a satisfaction in that, which had nothing to do with ego, and everything to do with the simple human need to be right about the world, to test your understanding against reality and find it sound. She crested the ridge as the first gray light began to separate the sky from the mountains. Below her, the valley lay in shadow, tiny lights moving through it. Their drones, their soldiers, their careful measured response to a woman with a rifle and 40 meters of wire. She looked at it for a moment. Just a moment. Then she turned and disappeared into the highlands, already thinking about what came next. There was always a what comes next. That was the thing they didn't understand about her, about any of them. She had seen it in their tactics, felt it in the shape of every pursuit, heard it in the way they set up their perimeters and planned their sweeps. They were waiting for the point where she would run out. Run out of will, run out of strength, run out of the particular burning thing inside her chest that had kept her moving for 814 days through cold and hunger and loss, and the specific terrible loneliness of being the last person in your unit, and choosing to keep going anyway. They were waiting for the end of her. She could have saved them the trouble. There was no end. She pulled her jacket tighter against the mountain wind and walked north, toward the next relay station, toward the next careful plan, toward the next day of a war that was nowhere near over. Behind her, the sun came up over Karat 7 the same way it always did, indifferent, enormous, absolute, and it lit the ridge where she had stood and showed nothing but empty rock and the suggestion of a boot print already filling with morning frost. She was already gone. She was always already gone. That was the thing about Amara Diallo that no sensor grid had ever managed to capture, that no kill team had ever managed to corner, that Vreth would spend the rest of his career trying to articulate in his reports and never quite get right. She did not fight like someone trying to survive. She fought like someone who had already decided to. And in the cold mathematics of war, across 31 conquered worlds and 400 engagements, and 240 years of professional violence, Vreth had never once encountered anything more dangerous than that.